Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another Game Explained discussion. Today we're going to be talking about Daemon X Machina for the Nintendo Switch. I'm your host, Steve Bowling, and I'm joined today by Daan Koopman, who has had a chance to play the full game for a couple of days now. I played the demo back when we did our Game & Watch a couple months ago, but like I said, Daan's had the whole game now for a couple of days, and I'm really curious to get your take on it, Daan. What do you think so far?
I feel a bit bummed about the whole thing, to be completely frank with you.
Oh no, that sounds pretty much in line with how I felt about the demo. What is it that's got you feeling down on the game so far?
It's a variety of stuff. I think the most important thing here is that there's not really a story to speak of. Like anything that keeps me going. Like the feeling of something that pushes you onward regardless of what happens. And that's the biggest thing here. Like the story is pretty much non-existent, and I have like problems even piecing it together as we speak right now, which is not a good sign. I'll try. There is an apocalyptic event known as the Moonfall. A moon above the Earth broke off and crashed into the surface, and red light turned all artificial intelligence against humans. And now also a subset of people were touched by the same energy, so they can now fight against these intelligence-driven entities. It really doesn't go anywhere so far.
Oh wow, that's really unfortunate. I was kind of hoping that the story would kind of fix the gameplay issues that I saw in the demo. About the gameplay, I found it to be a little bit slow and sluggish in the demo version. Have they sped it up or done anything to improve that at all?
Not really. It feels still sort of feels kind of sluggish. It's doable. I definitely got a hang of it by the end of the first rank, which is rank E. But definitely, it still feels sort of sluggish, especially with moving around the area in your mech and trying to traverse the area. It doesn't feel as smooth as it probably should. At the same time, I do like the gameplay aspects of it. Like, I like the shooting aspect of it, especially the types of guns that you have, like the cannons and the missile launchers and the regular guns, but also like the various swords that you have. There's a good variety there, and every time you play a mission and loot the enemies that you defeated, you get new stuff on top of it, which is really great. And the mission structure also really helps with that. Like, I thought at the beginning that the missions wouldn't be that interesting, but at the very least, it didn't really irritate me. Like, there's other stuff that really irritate me. Not so much like the mission structure-wise or like the initial gameplay quirks. You definitely have to get used to the speed, though.
So it takes a little bit of... Once you get more acclimated to the kind of slower pace of the game in general, did you find it to be a little more satisfying to play, or is it something that just kind of sticks in the back of your mind?
I was almost solely focused on finishing the goal at hand, to be completely frank with you. It's completely doable. You know what you're doing by the end of it, and you just feel going through the motions and see where the mission takes you. And that's sort of my feeling so far. Like, I've been just going through the motions. And in that way, it feels like the old Monster Hunter games, where you first go through a rank, you rank up, and then go to the next rank and do a bunch of missions again and again, until you go to the next rank, reverse and repeat. And
so you're feeling the grind a little bit.
Yeah, there's very much a grind here. There's absolutely a grind here. And from point blank, really, I started to feel it.
Ooh.
And I think that is the biggest problem with this game, is once again, it comes back to there's nothing really driving me onward. The single player campaign is very segmented from like the multiplayer options, because I think people would assume, just like an old school Monster Hunter game, that you can play all the missions in co-op or multiplayer,
right?
or single player regardless of setting. But that's not the case either, because the game offers separate co-op missions and doesn't follow the structure of the campaign at all.
Wow.
You actually do the campaign solely by yourself with only the help of AI allies keeping you going. And straight up, those AI allies aren't good. During one big boss fight that took me about 35 minutes to complete, I had to revive them each 4 times.
Oh, wow. And how many AI allies do you get?
Most of the time you get 2. There was 1 or 2 missions where I got 3, but they more played into like the story. Like the actual story stuff is basically merc groups fighting each other and seizing control of the world. And that's the only driving point so far. There seems to be a bigger plot ongoing and something that's building towards a larger conclusion. But that overarching plot is extremely confusing.
Gotcha. So I want to touch more on the multiplayer versus single player aspect in a little bit. I'm curious, how does the game perform technically on the Switch? Does it have like a decent frame rate? Does it look nice? How is it visually?
From a visual perspective, it looks pretty good. I had no complaints for the most part. The environments in particular look really nice. They can feel kind of empty, but for the majority of the part, they're not bad to look at or in the slightest. And for the majority, you are focusing on the action anyway. And those action elements look really pretty, especially when the boss do like those gigantic laser attacks shooting at you. That looks just really cool in motion. But once you go into the slower moments, which this game has plenty of, you do feel like it's sort of desolate. And it's not particularly in a bad thing. There are moments where it just shines all the way through, but there are moments where you're just looking at an environment and nothing really else.
That's kind of a bummer. Does the even when there's a lot of stuff going on screen though, does the frame rate hold up, or does it chug, or?
There were a few frame rate chugs, but for the majority they weren't really a major problem. In multiplayer I didn't really notice them either, so there wasn't really much in the way of like technical mishaps with the game.
Okay, I mean that's at least good, right? It's good to hear that at least some of the, that it's holding together on a purely technical perspective, even if it sounds like maybe the story is a little scattershot. Jumping back, you were talking about single player versus multiplayer and how those are kind of disconnected. Do you get any rewards in multiplayer that you can maybe bring over and add to your mech or anything like that? Or is there even mech customization beyond just loadouts?
There is definitely mech customization. There's also customization that you can do on your own player avatar. So fun fact, there is a playing mechanic where you can hop out of the mech and do specific moves. The funny part is I didn't really feel the need to use them much. For the majority I stayed in the mechs and tried to get the upgrades for those, which are both separated in a skill tree and in the various types of armor that you can wear, which has different types of durability, and then you have indeed, yes, the loadout. So there are various levels on which the various gameplay elements are controlled, but how you get them, it's kind of difficult, because sometimes you just randomly get them from enemies that you destroyed, which only happen in like almost at the start of rank D. So in rank E you really have a rough time adjusting, and you only get the weapons that you're given with. For the majority there are shops, but for the moment they have not really given me anything to work with. So for the majority I was just basically down to checking every mech if they have something unique that I didn't see before.
Oh, okay. And do you have more than one mech, or do you have just the one and you customize that one to be what you want?
So you have one mech, but you can save your loadout. So there are 12 loadout slots that you can apply like your various armor types and your various weapons to. So if you need something for a specific mission, then you can choose so. The money that you get, which you get regardless if you're doing single player or multiplayer, that is basically the overarching reward that you get every single time. I feel that I got less parts, like less machine parts, during the co-op online missions. For as far as I remember, I don't remember getting a single piece of gear during the online missions at all, and just getting a monetary reward, which once again, it's good for upgrades and for little trinkets, but for actually loading out your mech, it's not particularly useful.
Okay. And you mentioned, so roughly how many multiplayer missions do you have access to right now?
At the moment, it's about around 10.
And do you think that's going to expand, or do you know if that's going to expand, or as you play through more, or?
Yeah, so when I finished rank E, it were 4, and by the end of rank D, it were 10. So I definitely feel there will be more added across the board once I level up. How much they really end up being, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really bummed to hear. I was kind of hoping that after the demo, because the developers solicited feedback, that they would make a lot more changes to the game, and it sounds like maybe those changes were minimal. Did you play the demo, Daan?
Yes, I did.
So have you spotted anything that's just like crazy different from that for players that maybe have played that demo?
Well, there are better UI changes, and overall, it just the controls are more expanded in like easier quick swap of your weapons. For example, you can now add them easier to your left and right pylon and swap them on the fly. That works a whole lot better, and I think that side is way improved, and it makes the gameplay really enjoyable. But then the shell around it didn't seem that they made that many changes. Oh,
that's unfortunate. I do remember. I could be remembering incorrectly, but I seem to remember the developers tweeting out that they had changed lock-on mechanics in the game. Have you noticed anything different about how you lock on to enemies?
So there is not really a dedicated lock-on button. Lock-on is decided by the gear that you are wearing, and when you get closer to an enemy, the stats decide from how far you can shoot.
Gotcha. Okay. That was a little confusing to me in the demo, so it's good to hear that you've got kind of a better handle on it than I do, because I was definitely really confused as to why sometimes I could hit enemies that were much further out than I could at other moments.
Yeah, and the gear also clearly states from this increases the lock-on ability by this amount.
Oh, okay.
So you can make a judgment decision on that if you necessarily have to.
That's good to know. Are you finding missions to take like a long time to complete, or are they just kind of quick affairs? Would this work well like in handheld mode if you wanted to do one real quick on the train or on your commute somewhere?
It depends. Like, there are missions that were about 10 minutes long, but some immortals, which enemies are called, are really gigantic. One of the missions, once again, the mission where I had to constantly revive my AI, took about 40 minutes.
Right. You mentioned that. So those immortals are more like traditional boss fights in a sense, it sounds like?
For sure. They follow an interesting pattern. So basically, the two immortals that I came across so far is this gigantic four-legged platform where it's basically mechanic, but then there are actual like factories on top of it. It's really weird looking, where you have to shoot the legs, open its weak spots from the legs and underneath him, and attack him as much as you can. That took a really long time to complete. And there was another boss where it was basically... So this is really weird. It was basically just an aeroplane. It was basically just a mechanized helicopter that would fly towards you with all the power it has and then do massive damage. And if it wanted to be very defensive, it would shoot multiple lasers at various different angles to ensure that you would at least be hit once. It was a rather weird boss for sure. but those two gave me a whole bunch of trouble. They weren't really easy to do, especially since you're basically on your own.
Right. And there's no way to improve like the quality of your AI or upgrade their mechs so maybe they survive a bit better?
No, because the game tells a story about various merc groups, right? So those merc groups are constantly hired for specific missions. You're kind of the rookie that's attached to, that kind of keeps a bridge between all of them together. So basically, the game constantly swaps out like different allies for you. So you don't really have a fast team of allies that you can choose from. You get, by the end of every single rank, you get one ally that you can call upon and will actively join your team. But that ally can only be used in certain missions, and in other missions where the team definitely doesn't want to participate, it just grays out the option entirely.
Oh, yeah, that seems a bit restrictive. So you mentioned that the weapons were kind of a highlight for you so far.
Yeah,
what
sure.
What are your favorite weapons that you've seen, and what types of variety do you have there?
The blades were very interesting. At first, they solely focused on physical damage, which means that they didn't have the same restrictions as other weapons in the game, where they had a limited amount of ammo and you had to defeat small enemies to get ammo back, which I thought was a really cool touch. Later on, you do get special swords that, for example, have laser qualities to them, which allows you to do tons more damage, but also it loses power over time. Guns wise, you have like machine weapons, you have sniper rifles, you have missile launchers, you have bazookas. It goes all over the place, and with various types of accuracy and power and bullet amounts. And it's constantly stuff that you have to keep in mind, because you can only bring like 4 guns and 1 missile launcher, so you constantly have to swap between them when the situation suits you, and it's so entertaining and interesting.
Nice. So there is a bit of a bright spot in there, fortunately. Would you say that there's any one weapon or one loadout that's overpowered in your opinion?
Not necessarily. And I think that's a good thing. Like, you still have to make the best use of those weapons and avoid enemy attacks as best as you can. And the boost in there is really solid, and then you move out of the way, use one of your moves, and then get going. And I think when that flow happens and you're into it, that is where you see the high points of Daemon X Machina. But you have to realize that between those high points there are also some low points that you constantly have to think about, which is honestly the most annoying part of the game.
That's really unfortunate. I know that for me, one of the low points was kind of the in-between mission sections where I was in, I believe it was just like a hangar, and I had to prep for each mission, and I kind of felt like that was a little too in-depth for my taste. What's your take on that?
The hangar is basically just doing the loadout stuff and buying the items. There's not really a subworld or anything that you can really walk across. You're constantly focused in the hangar. It's kind of similar to like an old school Monster Hunter village. Choose a mission and then you go. That's really where it comes down to.
Oh, okay. So the Monster Hunter thing is pretty apt in this sense, and which explains why it didn't really click for me. I'm not a huge Monster Hunter guy. It sounds like maybe you might not be either.
No, I am a big Monster Hunter guy.
Oh, really?
I think it takes the most hokey parts of a Monster Hunter game, though.
Oh.
Where it basically is a mission list of basically doing the same thing. Because the good thing with a Monster Hunter game, you get at least some gameplay variety in the weapons you use and that sort of stuff.
Gotcha.
Here it kind of depends on what the mission wants from you, and then you have to apply your best logic to it. And you can just go in with the same guns over and over again, but in the end it's more to your detriment than anything else, and it's better to have at least some variety or some interest in seeing the game through and trying to upgrade your gear and just seeing what the other different guns do, because if you don't, you will lose fun a whole lot faster.
If you were to compare this to an existing mech-based franchise like Gundam or Macross or something more Western like Mech Warrior, where do you think Daemon X Machina would fall on that kind of graph?
You see, for me, it follows a lot more closer to like Armored Core, which is like the previous game that Tsukada-san of Marvelous worked on. He worked at From Software on that franchise for a very long time. And you can see a lot of blueprints from that game added to this game. And you see that in ways he tried to modernize it, like with the various weapon loadouts and how you control the game. He clearly wanted to do something new in a genre that he really liked. The problem is how that mission structures and the way that the game progressive has really moved on since then, and it makes me more bummed than angry or anything else. I just think that with a little bit more time and a little bit more outside perspective, the game could have been so much better.
Oh, that's sad to hear, but you do see it as kind of another one of these tales of a developer moving on but creating a spiritual successor to one of their beloved franchises.
For sure, absolutely. I think that Tsukada-san really believed in his vision. Like, I really sincerely think he did. And he wanted to see that through completion. And it's really clear that he wanted to make something that he would be like proud of to have in his lineage. But the way the mission set up and the very confusing story just leave a whole lot to be desired. And honestly, I think sincerely that if the campaign would have been fully available in multiplayer, being locally and online, I would have had less of a problem with this game. The major problem is that the campaign is like that mission structure that I really want out of like a multiplayer setting game, but instead there's only a handful of multiplayer missions, and I really don't get that.
Yeah, that seems like an incredibly bizarre choice. I'm a little let down to hear that, because I was thinking when I was playing even the demo, which I wasn't thrilled with, that it could probably be exponentially better if I had a friend to play it with. So it's really sad for me to hear that they kind of didn't open that up a bit more. Siloing off multiplayer seems like a really antiquated design philosophy.
It's so incredibly weird to me, because honestly, like, the gameplay elements of it are really fun and I want to like this game, but the way it's set up and the way it's progressing doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me.
Yeah, so I mean, but you are still early on in the game, right? You've only played through the first 2 ranks.
Yeah, and it took me a decent amount of hours, don't get me wrong, but I'm sort of starting to feel the burn, and it might not be there yet, and I hope it won't be. Please don't. But
sure.
I don't know where this will go, and this is the most frustrating thing about it. I want to see like a couple of ranks more for completion before I make my final verdict on this game. But this is the most conflicted I've been on the game in a while.
Right. So it's interesting to hear, because I know when I initially put out our Game & Watch for the game, a lot of fans responded and said, hey, you just don't understand the game, here's why it's great, and tried to educate me on why they think it's a fantastic game, but I just never saw it. So it's interesting to hear the same take from you, and I'll be interested to see what the fan reaction is when the game finally drops next month.
For sure. Yeah.
But for now, do you have any final thoughts on the game? Or any thing you want to close out the discussion with? Sorry.
Well, I think I said my piece on the game, honestly. The only thing that I can really think about is that I hope that the story will go somewhere, because I still don't know where this is going. Because we have barely touched on it, you have these various merc groups that are constantly in like a battle of words with each other, and then they clash a couple of times. But then it sort of dimmers down again, and it feels like the story is completely in the background and really doesn't give. They don't really care anything about the story in particular, and it's even in the way it's set up. Like there is 1 minute of cutscene and like 6 minutes of talking. The rest is all explained in like big walls of text.
Oh, that is rough. So hopefully that will be something that, picks up as the story goes on. But we're going to go ahead and cut it here for this discussion. As always, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed hearing a lot more about Daemon X Machina, a game that we really haven't gotten to talk about as much as we might like to. We're going to have a lot more on it in the coming weeks, including a full review. So stay tuned to Game Explained for all things Daemon X Machina and everything else gaming as well. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.